Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining another one of our webinars, the Wildcat Wisdom Online series. You've seen me, if you've been on our webinars before, you've seen me many times. I'm Jamie Weatherby. I work in the UNH Alumni Relations Office as an Associate Director of Alumni Career and Professional Success. I'm here joined today with Dean Megan Carpenter, and we're thrilled to have her here and for her time. She's going to be the kickoff of our launch of our weekly throughout November Women in Leadership series. So I have a whole bunch of questions for you to dive into your career path, and to learn a little bit about how you were able to get from where you started to being the dean of our law school here at UNH. For not some housekeeping, but for some directions, we want to make this as conversational as possible. So I have a whole bunch of questions to get us started with Megan today. But if you have questions for her, I really want to make sure that we're answering the things that you want to know about more than the questions that I think you want to know about. So if you can look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a Q&A feature. You can jump right into that button and type in your questions. And I do have a partner behind the scenes. Her name's Phoebe Moore, and she's going to be reading those questions for us. So feel free to interrupt at any time. We want to know what you want to know. And with that, we'll get started. So just as a way of introducing yourself a little bit to our audience, I just spent some time getting to know you, which is really great. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your career path. And as you describe your career path, describe whether or not most of your steps were planned and intentional, or how much of the moves that you made to get where you are were, taking opportunities as they came.
That is such a good question. Because I think I'm a fan of Sheryl Sandberg's kind of analogy of a career path being more like a jungle gym than it is a ladder. So, when you're on a ladder, you're kind of following this one linear path and you're not looking around. Mostly you're just looking at the rear end of the person who's above you. And when you're thinking of it more like a jungle gym, then you're more aware of, where opportunities may present themselves, and you kind of go off into a certain direction. And there are just pivots that happen from time to time. So I think you have to be intentional in a certain way, but you also have to be open to the things that happen. And certainly that's been my experience in my career. Also, on a jungle gym, the view is good from all kinds of places. So I started out teaching Spanish, actually, before I went to law school. And so when I went to law school, I assumed I would do things in the immigration and human rights space. I might be working in international business transactions. And so that was sort of my area of focus and interest at the time. When I left law school, I worked for a large law firm, K&L Gates, and in their Pittsburgh office, which was their largest office at the time. And there was all kinds of work kind of coming at us constantly. And so, there were many different practice areas that the firm had in the office. And at one point, somebody called me up and said, do you want to take this trademark case? We have a trademark case. And I didn't even really know what a trademark was. I didn't take any intellectual property classes in law school, but I said yes, of course, because that's what you say when you're a first-year associate. And I just fell in love with it. And it was at the time of the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was this kind of dot-com explosion of tech companies and startups, and there was such a need for the development of intellectual property and technology law. So I started to just take everything I could get in that practice area anytime there was an opportunity. Now, again, it had no academic training, and so the practice group I ended up with, many of them had taken classes in the field, and I just sort of through grit and determination tried as hard as I could to make myself really indispensable. They started calling me Radar from a character in MASH, because I was, sort of enthusiastic and always would try to anticipate needs before they arose. And as a result, I was kind of the most junior attorney that was appointed to supervise the internet enforcement team and worked mostly for, for a variety of different startups and places that were seeking funding. But in the end, my practice really migrated to one of our biggest clients, which at the time was the World Wrestling Federation Entertainment Organization. So I worked with professional wrestlers. I always like to say I worked in professional wrestling, but I didn't actually get to wrestle, except in the most intellectual of ways and legal arguments. But, people always say that, 90% of cases settle and you never get to make these really creative arguments in real life. Mm-hmm. But a client like that, values publicity and valued innovation in legal services. So we really got to do things that push the boundaries of intellectual property law doctrine at the time, from thinking of ways to protect kind of the signature moves of wrestlers to... I
love that you have the signature move down. that one in particular.
The people's elbow. And
awesome.
or filing what somebody in our practice group filed the first domain name action in the world. And so there were all kinds of things that we did that were so intellectually fascinating to me. Now, at the same time, I also had a son who was little, and I grew up, I guess, having my parents just tell me that I was smart, and that was like my thing, right? Wasn't funny or anything else, but I was smart. And I felt like in some ways, here I was spending a lot of hours every day, not really doing something that was satisfying to my soul. I mean, it was intellectually, I loved every minute of it. But then I started to wonder if there wasn't something more behind intellectual property and the boundaries of intellectual property that I could explore. So in the end, I decided to leave the law firm and quit my job and sold my home and moved to Ireland, where I started doing postgraduate work at a human rights center there, exploring kind of the human rights connections and boundaries of intellectual property law. So after that, I started my teaching career, came back to teach at West Virginia University, where I'd gone to school, and then built programs at Texas Wesleyan, Texas A&M, and then came here as dean.
Yeah, that's quite the journey. And definitely it sounds like you made quite a few pivots, but each one kind of built upon itself. But a lot of it sounds like maybe you didn't know those exact steps when you were in them, but like in hindsight, you can see the path and how it built on itself.
Isn't that always the way that you can kind of look back and you see the narrative? I think it's part of when people say things happen for a reason, because you can just see this constructed narrative that happens all the way through. But, I couldn't see it prospectively.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of like when you travel, you have to travel with an intention of where you're going and what you want to do, but you have to be open to kind of the travel mojo of, there's this really cool cafe down this alley, or there's this other thing we want to explore that we just heard about that was really cool. And that's how you have sort of the best, most fulfilling experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And without it, you would have such a linear experience. You wouldn't really be able to bring such robust perspective to any of the roles that you're in. So yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned a few, but you've held several leadership roles within universities now, before you arrived here at UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law. But I would love to know, so one of the greatest challenges, I think, as a leader is you step into typically an established team, and they have their own vibe and they have their own expectations. So when you jump in as the leader of a team that's kind of already got their groove going, what do you do in that? What's your first thing you do to build a rapport with that team and make progress there in the direction that you see is important?
I guess two things. I would say listening and food. So
I gotta say that's true for college kids too. Yes, apparently that doesn't change. Yeah.
And maybe this is the way I grew up. Food was very central to our kind of social interaction. But I think you cannot underestimate the power of listening.
A good sandwich.
Yes. Donuts.
Yeah.
But no, I think listening is critical. And I've seen it go the other way when leaders have come into an organization and you're hired for a vision too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you come in and present visions, and this is, in part what people find compelling, but you can't just come in and implement that vision in some kind of preordained way. And I've seen that in some situations not go well. So what I really try to do is spend a lot of time listening to the team and doing it in different ways, because groups will have a certain dynamic themselves. And if groups have a dynamic, you want to see what comes out of the group. Sometimes it's bigger than the sum of its parts, and there's a real value in hearing people as teams talk about their teams and their experiences. But also, talking to people one-on-one individually. Before I came on here, before I started, I set up phone calls with every individual faculty and senior staff member and set aside at least an hour for each one of those calls. And, it was really an unparalleled opportunity to hear from people about what's important to them, what their goals are, and also to solicit input, because all kinds of people have really good ideas about, the way they think, what some of the challenges are and where some of the opportunities lie. And some of the biggest initiatives we followed have really come out of some of those conversations. So I think that's something that listening and hearing from the teams and getting to know the culture before starting to implement is important. And bringing donuts or eating together never helps. I really believe that there's something kind of spiritual or connective
too.
about kind of, I don't know whether it's like breaking bread together kind of thing or not, I don't know, but just something about connecting over a shared experience, I think is also important.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense, and it breaks down some walls. I think it doesn't feel as formal.
I still do that even today with donuts with the dean. So I have a monthly gathering where students can come, faculty can come too, but it's really and staff, but it's primarily for students, and students can just stop by, talk about anything that's on their mind. We eat donuts. It's awesome. A good time.
Yeah.
And they get that direct access to me, which is something that I had never had, as a student before, but I think that, it's important.
I think that's great. So since you've been here at UNH, can we talk a little bit about your journey leading since you've been here, and what challenges have you faced in your current role, and what have you done to overcome those? And then in that same vein, if you can think about, being in so many leadership roles and the dean of a university, how would you suggest other young women, or if there's maybe freshmen or sophomores here that are students on the webinar, how did they overcome their challenges in their own career?
It's thinking about kind of higher education leadership in general. There are all kinds of challenges. Some of them are relevant to the business world, and some of them are kind of unique unto themselves. And as I think back on building my career in leadership, I did have kind of one personal setback that required me to pivot in a way that I absolutely worked out for the best, but was challenging for me at the time. I grew up in West Virginia, and I loved my state. And I think my friends and I all loved our state too, but we felt like we knew this one unassailable fact, and that is that growing up in an area that was economically depressed and didn't have a major city meant that we would all, to have kind of a real job, that we were going to have to leave our state and find our careers elsewhere. But I always kind of thought that I would come back someday and would help fix things and help bring economic prosperity and to the state. So after I was working in a law firm and did postgraduate work, I returned and started my teaching career there at the law school. And I really kind of started the intellectual property program there. There had been a couple of individual classes, but we started a program. We kind of had the seedlings of a clinic that would serve members of the community. And students were really energized, and we were working with the governor and a member of Congress at the time to figure out ways to transition from kind of an economy based on coal to an economy based on content. And I successfully argued that the position should be made a permanent or tenure track position. And I ultimately didn't get the position. And it was the other candidate, I was told, had a better kind of pedigree because the other candidate had gone to a higher ranked Ivy League school. And I had gone to West Virginia University, the state university. And for me, that was problematic on so many levels because...
And this is the state university that you're now working for. Right?
Yes, exactly.
So you went to school at the university that you're working for, that they said that you weren't qualified or at the level of pedigree, like you said, to work back for them.
Which I felt at the time was, here I'm telling my students, you can be anything you want to be. You can just knock it out of the park. You will change the world. But at the same time, to send the message of like, but you will never be good to teach here. That was really hard. It was a hard message for me, and it was a hard message, I think, for the students, as well. So kind of, in the end, and I was supposed to go to an Ivy League school and decided to defer to go to the state university instead. And I was so proud of the education that I had received. And I have to say now that I'm in a position to hire so frequently, what I want to see is what students make of their education. I don't want to just see where you went to school. I want to see when you go to a state school and you have really carved out your path, there are so many opportunities available at public institutions of higher education. And so I prioritize that when I think about hiring, the grit, the excellent education that you can receive at a public institution where you're really carving out your own path and making your own way and using your own initiative. So, for me, it all worked out, for the best because I sort of pivoted on the jungle gym when I had, multiple offers from other states and sort of have built my career from there. But it was an initial setback for me and to what I thought. If I'd been on kind of the linear ladder and thought that there's just only kind of one way I wanted to succeed, I think that would have been a problem for me.
Yeah, so a very challenging roadblock.
Yeah.
So then when you talk about, hiring, I'm just curious, do you feel that especially in, I want to say law schools in that industry, are you seeing there being a change where more people are thinking like you, where they're willing to take somebody from, state schools or from different backgrounds? Or do you feel like you're kind of leading the charge in that direction? There's still this pedigree mindset behind hiring in law schools?
I do think, unfortunately, there's still a pedigree mindset, but I think that we're increasingly seeing a sea change in the way we approach legal education generally.
Yeah, I can see that.
It used to be that sometimes in law schools, professors would get hired who had never practiced law, but I think that that's fairly
changing
uncommon.
too, right?
Yes.
Now? Yeah.
So I think that, we're really transforming in legal education the way we think about, what the needs of students are, because what the needs of students are will, help inform the way that we educate our students. And so I think that we are seeing some changes there.
Awesome. That's great to hear, I would say, in a lot of ways.
It is.
And improving education and what professors are bringing to the table. It's hard if you only stay in academics and you don't have that real world application to it.
Yeah. And, at UNH Franklin Pierce, we've always approached it in a different way in that way. So when you walk into the law school, there's a quote from the founding dean right in the foyer. And it says, the prospect of starting the law school struck me as a rare opportunity to stop talking about what's wrong with legal education and start doing something about it. And so that kind of ethos of the different approach.
What a great driver.
It is. Yeah. It has really been powerful. Our spirit from the beginning, and it is still our spirit today. And so, I have one professor who phrased this to me actually in one of our initial calls before I joined. And he threatens to like charge me royalties every time I say it. But we don't just teach people to think like lawyers, but we also teach people to be lawyers. And so I think that the things that we're doing now and the things that we've been doing for a long time, there are other law schools that are starting to catch up there.
That's great. I think we have a question from someone online.
With the implementation of the new hybrid JD program, how have you seen education and access to education change in the last few years?
That's such a great question. And I'll tell a little bit about the hybrid JD program that's part of the school right now. We just launched it in August. We have a hybrid JD that it's mostly online, but it requires people to come to New Hampshire for kind of 4 days at a time, a long weekend, 4 times a year, once per quarter. And what we have discovered is, we've had a great program in intellectual property that's been top ranked for the last, nearly 30 years. A lot of us people think of us as kind of the IP school. We do a lot of other great things, but that has been a real core strength of ours. And so one of the things that we realized is that there are a lot of people these days, law school is expensive. And there are a lot of people who may have a dream of becoming a lawyer and getting a top ranked, legal education in intellectual property and technology law, but who may not be in a position to, quit their job and move their family often, to New Hampshire for 3 years. It's a great idea to do that. And so if you can do that, I think being here is a wonderful place. But it enables us to kind of get our program out to people who are, anywhere in the country. And what we have seen is that, our goal to make a legal education that's top ranked, not kind of like your average part-time program that you're going to go to in the evenings that's local just because it's there, but actually a top-notch legal education, making that available to people who would not otherwise get it, sort of democratizing legal education in a way. And it was a core part of the vision of that program. And it is absolutely coming to life. So we have 69% of people with advanced degrees who are part of the program. They are mid-career. Our average age in the program, I believe, is 38. We have
what's the average age of, what's a typical average age of a law student? So 38 for the hybrid.
Yeah, so significantly older, I think, than the average age of people coming out for a regular residential JD programs, which would be more like, 24.
And most people typically are typical law student, which I feel like there is no typical student these days, but would be coming right after undergrad for the most part, right? Most people don't get that secondary education and then loop back in for the law degree. I feel like it's the typical track.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when it comes to intellectual property and technology law, it often benefits someone to have that degree, perhaps a career in engineering first, or maybe there's a patent agent or someone who's working in a tech company. And the way that we look at it is that working professionals, people who are out there, every day working in these tech spaces, bring something really valuable to the curriculum itself. And so that's not a negative, that's a positive. Like you
have more background information. Not only do you get the legal background, but then you're bringing your field or your industry, which maybe you're intending to working in ideally, right? And you're marrying those two experiences.
Exactly. And to the other students. So the whole classroom gets the benefit of everyone's experience. And and our diversity numbers are significantly higher.
Oh, that's exciting too. Yep.
And so I think we have about 36% diversity in the hybrid program.
Wow. Do you find, so people are attracted to the hybrid program, are they not local, or are you finding there's still a lot of local folks, but the hybrid just works better for them?
No, we're not really, there are a couple of people in New Hampshire, but for a local program, we would rather steer them toward the residential program. Really, we're trying to make this program available to people who just otherwise wouldn't be able to access it.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic. Well, just to jump back a little bit into more of the leadership experience that you've had, I would just be curious to know, because you have had such a strong history in leadership roles, did you always see yourself as a leader, or is that something that just kind of cultivated over the years?
You know, I guess I've some of the research about calling kids bossy when they're girls, and you know, maybe not, and having leadership qualities more if they're boys. That's all really resonated with me, but I worry that it's resonating with me in the way that I think maybe I was just really bossy. I don't know. I'm not sure if I demonstrated leadership qualities or whether I was kind of a jerk. But I, you know, we had a neighborhood pack of kids, and I always had them kind of, you know, we were organized and, you know, sort of doing different things at different times, yeah, so it's a little shameful to think back on that, but I do think that cultivating leadership qualities and being a leader is something that has always been a part, really, of my upbringing and my DNA.
And I know, so one thing that for me personally, one of the most fulfilling parts of my role, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier, but has been doing these Women in Leadership series and having women leadership panels. And I keep saying that I would love to get to a place where there's no reason to qualify the women in leadership, or they're just leadership panels. But I think still today, we see more men in leadership roles than women, just statistically. I think one of the biggest challenges about that as a aspiring leader, or as a young girl, or even a college student, is it's hard to envision yourself in a role where you've never seen someone do it. So it's hard to place yourself in that role of a leader if you don't have any strong female role models around you that you're aspiring to be like. Usually that modeling behavior is really powerful. So for you, did you have strong female leaders in your life? And did you kind of be able to put yourself in that position to say, I could be like them?
Yeah, you know, to be honest, I think there was nothing I didn't think that I could do because I was a girl or a woman when I was growing up. My family is really, the women in my family are very strong. And my grandmothers, I mean, I think we're very matriarchal in structure in a certain way. And both of my grandmothers were probably two of my best friends growing up, that we spent lots of time together.
Yeah.
And you know, they were really the center, the glue that held all of us together. And the women in my family were very, always told us, as you know, my cousins and I, as we were growing up, that we could just do anything we wanted to do. And so I grew up really not thinking that my sex or gender was some kind of barrier. But, you know, something happened to me in my college years where I had a roommate, and then we didn't see each other for a few years. She moved somewhere else. And when we got together, we were in our early 20s, she said to me, you know, who are the strong women in your life now? And I thought, what an interesting question. I was more thinking about, you know, getting my first job and, you know, studying in graduate school. And it wasn't something that I thought of as kind of an important structure for my life. But that moment that I've remembered now for decades really transformed. I realized then that I should have those people on that list, and I should always have, you know, 3 or 4 people, strong women that I'm engaging with and I'm looking up to and I'm learning from and seeking out their company all the time. And I would definitely recommend that to students, because sort of starting with that framework and thinking like, I really do need intentionally to have this kind of role in my life, would be valuable.
Absolutely. Well, I do think there's something to be said for what's the phrase, that you are an average of the 5 people or 7 people that you spend the most time with. So I think being really mindful of who are you surrounding yourself with, and are they people that pull you up, not pull you down, or just keep you the same if you're trying to be growth minded and go into leadership roles. So it's really a great advice for sure. I think we have a few more questions, or at least one question from our online audience.
Yes. This person is asking, were there any challenges associated with being the first female lead of the law school? And if so, how are you able to make it clear that you are the leader?
Yeah, it's interesting. I am surprised in some ways that still it is not, it's not sort of 50-50 when it comes to leadership of law schools relative to female and male leadership. But I think our faculty and our staff and our students, I think, and I don't know if they would give a different answer, but I think they were ready for any kind of leadership from, a woman or a man. And I haven't felt like there were any obstacles at all to that. I guess, the one time I feel, and I don't know if this is a gender component or an awkwardness of email component, but I know that in deans that I've worked for in the past, and they have mostly been men, sometimes someone would send a short, curt email that was just, sort of some kind of instruction. And I never took it personally, but I don't feel particularly comfortable drafting that same sort of email. And I again, don't know if it's a gender component or just an awkwardness of email, but email can be misinterpreted in so many different ways. And it is always important to me to make sure that I'm thoughtful and polite and kind, perhaps above all else. And so I don't know. I mean, do you do the same with your emails? You're trying to make sure you're so like, does this convey exactly what I want it to convey with the right tone? And
yeah, emails. I mean, I think that's true for anybody, but emails definitely tough. I think if you don't have the right amount of, adjectives and exclamation points and expletives to be able to say, I'm clearly writing emotion into the email. I do think that people, and myself included, it's easy to read it through your own lens. But, and I bet there is a gender component to that, where if there was a short email from your, male coworker or boss, you don't take it as, snarky or snippy or something. They just were to the point. And I think that it's possible people receive female emails with, an attitude. And I don't, I think that's a constant challenge of, the assertive versus bossy thing versus the, needing to be likable, but, stand your ground. And
do you, where do you stand on emojis in professional emails? Yes or no?
Internal professional emails, yes. Also the occasional GIF is spot on. So there's some of those that float around our office for sure, and I think they go a long way. I think that they especially can show your sense of humor and lighten the mood or make someone's day laugh. I have to be working with somebody externally for quite some time before I throw in an emoji. And if they are, it's a concern. It's like a smiley face emoji. It's really not something crazy. I usually keep them to a minimum. But I know just I do make a huge effort to write my emotions into my emails. It takes more time, and it's definitely would be easier to send the quick, this is the point email. But I think it's challenging when you read an email to always know where that person's coming from. So I try really hard to make sure that it's clear. And on the reverse side, a personal practice of mine is when I read an email, and if it makes me mad, I take a moment and think, what's the nicest voice that person could possibly be emailing me in? And then I read it in my head with a super sweet voice. So that's not that bad. I'm just going to assume that that's what they meant. And then I run with it that way. So that's kind of my go-to move with email. That's tough. Yeah. Did we have more questions? Not right now? Okay, great. I have plenty of stuff. So in my research for our interview, one of the reports that I had looked into, it's a 2019 Kingsley Lean In report that talks a lot about the status of women in the workplace. And a couple great quotes came out of that, and I would love your reaction or thoughts to some of these quotes. So one is, and I'm just going to read it so I don't, misconstrue what they had said, but is, I would say I've received a fraction of the opportunities I would have had as a white man. I think that this was somebody, a female of diverse background, who said this quote. The ones that I did receive, I had to fight really hard for. I've seen many white men groomed for leadership. That didn't happen for me. I literally had to kick open doors. How do you feel about that statement? And did you feel like in your professional path, there was some kicking down of doors that had to happen along the way to get to where you are and have the opportunities that you've had?
There's one time I fantasized about kicking down a door literally, but didn't actually do it. The closest I think I would come to that situation was when I was working at a large law firm, and my practice group really, I mean, the majority of attorneys in my practice group were men, and some were phenomenal mentors and great friends, and that I am still in touch with. But many of them had stay-at-home wives and who sometimes packed their lunches. And at the time, I mean, that was fine, right? It was great. Like how people figure out their balance of life and work is all fine, however it works in every individual family. But for me at the time, I had a, 1-year-old through, I don't know, just his toddler years. And I was taking kind of the bus into town and had to walk him with my briefcase and the diaper bag, 6 blocks to his daycare, and come back. And I had to, I was pumping because I was nursing him. So I was pumping in my office during the day multiple times. And I would spend my lunchtime walking back down to nurse him during the lunch hour and come back. So I didn't really have time to eat lunch. And, and then doing that all reverse at the end of the day, like going to get him and then walking and taking the bus home. And, he was always like the last kid at daycare. I was always owing the like $1 a minute or whatever, because I couldn't get him on time. And so it was a particularly difficult time for me with the balance of kind of work and life. But so there was one time where I had one colleague, again, thoughtful, lovely person, good friend of mine, where he had a snack drawer in his office that it was kind of the overflow from the lunches that were packed for him every day. And so this snack drawer, occasionally I'd see him get up. It seemed to me to be filled mostly with cupcakes, like those Hostess kind of cupcakes. And so there were a couple of times, maybe on a bad day, where I kind of fantasized about like marching down to his office and kicking open his door and grabbing the drawer and grabbing the cupcake and then just smashing it in his face, saying like, this is so hard. And the part that seemed difficult for me was that he could kind of just come into the office and not have to worry about anything else, and then just be working throughout the day, when some of the circumstances of my being a mother of a young child made it so that I had to kind of tuck both sort of the mothering part and the work part in through the office. But honestly, I mean, I think maybe unconsciously I've entered rooms a little forcefully sometimes, but the truth is as I said earlier, I grew up in a family with really strong women. And, on my mom's side, the women in my family very much kind of were holding us all together. And I never thought of my family as disadvantaged, or thought of myself as a woman as disadvantaged in some way. My grandmothers were truly my biggest role models as I was growing up, and in many ways my closest friends. And I think the men in my family were similarly supportive. I remember a time when I was in school and I was struggling in a class. My dad's response was, you're the smartest person I know. If you can't do it, no one can. And it just changed the dynamic for me, rather than like I'm struggling in this class to like, wait a second, I can do this. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think I've had to kick down doors along the way. And I'm really thankful that I didn't do it to my dear friend in the law firm either. It wasn't a proud moment for me.
Well, I mean, he probably should have shared his snacks. I mean, it would have been a nice gesture.
He probably would have been happy to share his snacks.
Yeah, that's funny. I think we have a follow-up, another question from online.
When you need to focus on your own development, what do you do? Read a book, attend a conference, have a session with your mentor?
That's a great question.
That is a really great question. I've been trying to read read books, but I'm doing a lousy job of it these days. And I think it's in part because of my attention span in the nature of my job is kind of 24/7. So I'm moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And often I'm sort of doing 3 things in my head at the same time. So it has become a focus issue for me. And in order to kind of enhance my focus, I've learned that doing things like hiking or skiing kind of that involve my body and my mind all together in challenging ways, is a way to work on my focus. When it comes to development, I do find it incredibly helpful to attend conferences and to talk to people who are, in similar situations at other schools. I have, a couple of deans at other law schools. We are able to just text each other and touch base and share stories and kind of bounce ideas off of one another. And I think that community has been really helpful to me. Because my area of focus also has been in, was in intellectual property in practice, it also feels, I think, less isolating as a leader of a school that also has a core focus in that area, among other very strong areas as well. But I think that has been helpful for me from a professional development standpoint.
Going off that, actually, so you mentioned the networking piece and the building relationships in your industry. So one of my questions was, how has networking played a role in your success? But it sounds like you've built quite the support network. So if you want to build on that, that would be great. But to follow up with that is, have you always been able to just walk into a room and network? That's intimidating. Sometimes when people are like networking, it feels like this big scary thing that people really just don't love doing and don't want to do. But it's so important. That's how people get jobs. That's how you get, opportunities. That's how people will seek you out for opportunities instead of you always going to find them. And it's because they trust you and you build those relationships. So has that always been easy for you? And if it hasn't, how have you gotten past that or recommend someone get past that?
I think one of the biggest barriers for me is in calling it networking or calling it mentoring, because that, for some reason, I don't know if it feels like an awkward,
it feels
almost like
ominous and kind of forced. A little bit. It's like this big thing. Yeah.
So I once had a student who came up to me and just said, kind of out of the blue, "Will you be my mentor?" And I felt like it was like, "Will you go out with me?" Or like, it's like one of those moments where you're just thinking like, okay, yes, I know, like, I would like to be your mentor, but like, what does that mean? And it added this element of kind of artificiality where really I would have been happy to do all the things that mentoring involved, but adding this kind of formalized relationship structure seemed just, made it more awkward, I think, for both of us. And I thought, like, what is a mentor supposed to do? Like, better Google, like, what are the job responsibilities of
the
a
job
mentor?
description of a mentor.
But so I think maybe for those people who don't feel good at it, and I wouldn't have come to it naturally, but I've always really liked people, and I love to talk to people, and I love to interact with them, and I love to learn from them. And I learn from so many people at the law school and outside the law school every single day. My teammates, and I would say I have, sort of unofficial mentors that are, my teammates on the leadership team. Also, I learn things from students all the time.
Reverse mentoring is definitely becoming a much more popularized thing.
I haven't even heard of that, but I think that's great. Yeah. So it's learning things from our staff and our faculty. So I feel like I would say my mentor group for me is just really wide. But if you called it like, so who is your list of mentors, or go out and find a certain number of mentors, I would find that really intimidating. But I do think, make sure that when you meet people and you're talking to people, get business cards and write down as soon as you can on the back of or the front of the business card, like what the connection is so that you remember it. And sometimes even if I'm in a social situation where I can't write on the business card right away, I'll like tear it or dog ear it in my pocket. So I kind of remember, this is a prospective student. I'll do a little dog ear. Or this is someone I need to follow up with about, professionally, and I'll do a little tear in it. So there are things that you can do to make sure that you're getting the benefit of those connections as you're talking to people and meeting them, that you're able to follow up with them later. And I think the follow-up is incredibly important.
That's really smart. So that's funny. So there's a couple of things we recently, so one of the projects that I've been working on with our career and professional success team over the past year has been Wildcat Connections. And this was a perfect segue because I was going to talk about this at the end anyway, but it's an exclusive UNH mentorship platform. But to be fair, we actually struggled, and we don't use the word mentorship quite often because there's a stigma around that word. And it feels like as a mentor, you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so responsible for this person, and this feels so big and intense, and I don't feel qualified, or I don't feel like I have the time or something. When really, if it was, can we grab a cup of coffee? I'd love to pick your brain. That's so much more accessible and approachable. People are like, of course, I love coffee. Like, let's go grab a coffee.
Or donuts
or something. Exactly. And that's why, so we've actually been really careful. We've talked about that word a lot, about not using it. Instead, the way we've described it is trying to come up with and this is not your board of directors as a professional, where you have an advisory board that helps guide you on your way, where it takes more than one person. It doesn't mean that when you find your mentor and you hold on to them for dear life and they're responsible for your professional success, you find multiple people and you take nuggets out of those relationships, and they help drive you. So it's just interesting to hear you echo that, because that's something that we've struggled and talked quite a bit about with around mentorship here at UNH. So so that's interesting, and it's very true. And I think this is something that I've learned over the years. But if you just say, hey, can we jump on the phone? I would love to ask you a few questions. Or it feels awkward to ask, but almost people are always so receptive. And the worst thing that happens is maybe the person doesn't answer you if it's over LinkedIn, if it's over something. So, it doesn't feel that big on the receiving end. It feels uncomfortable to ask. But when you get asked to a mentor or grab coffee, I feel like it's a feel-good moment. You're like, oh, that person wants to, learn from me. I'd be happy to talk to them and share what I know. It's pretty the most common response I've seen.
Yes, absolutely. And both sides have something to learn from each other. Of course. I mean, as I kind of, as we've been talking and I looked at some of the questions that you're asking, I, felt like in some ways, I don't have any wisdom to share. That I'm thinking that, some of these things are really things that I wrestle with on a daily basis, and, have really, I've given thought to, but I don't know that I've kind of arrived at some form of something that I feel like is conclusive.
Yeah.
And so I think in many ways, the questions that you're asking are things that we should all be thinking about all the time, that it's this loop. It's not like you get to kind of an end point and then you think back of like, what's the wisdom I have to share? But you're constantly throughout your career kind of in this loop of reflecting and assessing. And then, I think we shouldn't have one midlife crisis, for example. I think we should have like a whole bunch of them, but they're not crises. They're just sort of assessment and reflection points. And are you where you want to be on the jungle gym? And do you want to kind of move over in this direction? And when you look back, what are your thoughts on that as well? So I really think that this is a great process, and that we all have something to learn from it.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned this earlier, and I forget where I was planning to plug this in, but I would love to hear you talk about it more. And this idea of the imposter syndrome, that I think that happens to a lot of, I would argue, people, but I think women especially, where you get to this place of, a leadership role or a place of authority, and you feel like, oh God, like, did they mean to pick me? Did they miss that I don't like my resume? Or you just feel like you show up and you don't belong in that role, but you did, you got hired, you're there, like it's where you belong. How do you overcome that feeling? And it sounds like you've had that feeling, and how do you balance that or work through that?
Oh, I have it every day. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have it. I think, but I'm trying to think of what would be a good kind of example. I definitely felt like when I applied for this job as dean, that would probably be a great example of a time where I felt it most. I mean, applying for a deanship, if I'd been on that kind of ladder and just looking up at the rear end of the person in front of me, I would not necessarily have applied for a deanship. I wasn't sort of out looking for a deanship. This, though, presented an enormous opportunity for personal growth for me. I love I love building teams and having teams work together. I love facilitating the success of others. And I'm really committed to innovation in higher education. And I've always been a bit business minded when it comes to higher education as well. So I think all of those things make a deanship a very natural fit for me. And I have such a respect for this kind of school that's always had the guts, the moxie, the grit to take the different approach that always has students at the center and says what's good for students and what's good to prepare them to practice law. So having, all of this, I didn't just want to be a dean anywhere, but to be a dean here at this time has been a phenomenal opportunity for me. Now, when I, interviewed, I thought, that there was no way that it would ever work out. And what I decided to do, and maybe there was just a freedom in the imposter syndrome. So the imposter syndrome, as I'm thinking about it now, really gave me the freedom to be myself because I was an imposter. I couldn't try to be somebody else. I just needed to be exactly who I was. And so I just went into it thinking, this isn't going to be happening. It's going to be a learning experience for me no matter what. And I am just going to be 100% who I am in every minute of the process. And so I think that the imposter syndrome that people sometimes feel like they have, maybe think about ways that you can kind of leverage that internally to your benefit. And
that's great advice, because I think it's challenging, but that's a way to almost repurpose that feeling and something that drives you or helps you be more authentic, maybe.
Yeah. And so it just enabled me to kind of put aside all the extraneous stuff or BS and just to be able to say, I'm just going in there because I got nothing else. I'm going to be exactly who I am. And I think that that really kind of worked strategically.
I bet that garnered a lot of respect for you coming into your role too. I think being authentic and be able to say, I'm just being myself in this role. You're not trying to go in and, embody this person that you think you're supposed to be being. You're just going in as yourself. And I think that that's really relatable, and people are much more comfortable to be led by someone like that than this person who's going in trying to be self-inflated to fit the criteria that they think they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. I do think being true to yourself and figuring out that authenticity is so important as a leadership quality.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's with this current role, and I don't know if this is how you felt, but this is another thing I've heard many times from a gender norm perspective. When women are looking at jobs, it's said that if they're looking at a job description that they feel like they can apply to that job if they can check every one of the boxes. They're looking at all the requirements and they're like, yep, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. So I apply to that job because I meet all the requirements. Whereas, again, stereotypically, when a man looks at a job description, he's like, I got 60, maybe 70%. I'll learn the rest and I'll be able to, self-promote myself enough that they'll be willing to give me a shot on the rest. And I think a lot of times that maybe what happens when, you're trying to grow, because you're always trying to grow to something that you fit perfectly into rather than a stretch job or stretch opportunity. Have you felt that kind of sentiment, and how have you been able to get past that idea, or when you're looking for your next role to say, I may not check all the boxes, but I know I could, and I know I can do it?
Mm-hmm. I think that if I waited until I knew how to do every single thing in my job to take the job, I would be
10 steps
dead.
behind.
I mean,
you,
I would
right?
be
you wouldn't, yeah, when you get to this level, because you'd always kind of pigeonhole yourself into the same little space.
Yeah. Who wants to do the same thing that they already know how to do? I mean, I think that, when you have a critical mass of skills, what's important is your aptitude and your ability to apply your skills in new contexts. And so, I have one of the most wonderful things about my job is that I do things that make me feel uncomfortable every single day. And the older I get, I think that
the more comfortable you get being uncomfortable.
That I think I was going to be a little depressing to bring in some I'm sure I'm not getting the neuroscience right, but I think as you get older, the only way to sort of develop the capability in new brain cells is to have new experiences. So, that's one, even on the worst days, I think, okay, I've developed a lot of brain cells on this particular day.
Today was a big brain cell day. Yeah. I love that.
And I'll be, more prepared tomorrow. But I think we all, as one of the most critical pieces in a career, in leadership or otherwise, is just having your opportunity for personal growth and to be part of an organization that is, that is innovative and is moving forward, often allows that opportunity for personal growth. And so I think that there's just you can't wait till you check every single box. I mean, check a critical mass and then go figure out how to do the rest.
I love that advice. So we're actually at, this flew by. We have 5 minutes left today with our webinar. So I have a couple questions that I would love to hear about your thoughts and direction for the UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law. Sorry, it's a little bit of a mouthful. I get stuck on that one. But I want to know, so I have a couple questions, but for the audience too, we have 5 minutes left. So if anybody has any final questions, now would be the time. So definitely pop those in there. But while people are thinking about their final questions, I would love to know, when you start thinking about there's so many critical priorities when you're trying to lead a law school, that I love to know, how do you determine what's the most important and in which direction to head?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something that I spend a lot of time on. I mean, what we have done at the law school, because we've been sort of engaging this in innovation and kind of an innovation strategy over the last couple of years since I came in. And I would say here again is where listening becomes so important. So we had brainstorming sessions among faculty and staff. We also did focus groups. We solicited input from students for ideas, innovative ideas. And we also did kind of anonymous surveys. So for people who may not feel comfortable sharing ideas. So getting input from a variety of sources and then in a variety of different ways is essential to being able to figure out what your strategic direction is. And then there's a lot of business modeling and market research that goes into it as well. And so that's kind of the second step, so that we're making sure that we're getting everybody's input and buy-in to the strategic direction, because everybody's got to be on the same team and rowing in the same direction in order for that to work.
Great. And then for the final question, where do you see yourself heading in the direction for the law school? Do you have any upcoming priorities and initiatives that you'd like to share or that you're working towards right now?
How many more minutes do we have?
I guess that's true, right?
I am so much more comfortable talking about the law school than I am myself. So
you're like, we can do a second webinar.
We do, yeah.
Go for another hour, yeah.
But this is such an exciting time in legal education. Law schools have had this, kind of a one-size-fits-all approach for a long time. And the way that many law schools have been proceeding is like the same way they've been doing it for the last 100 years. But the legal services market is changing. And the need for legal education in the marketplace is changing. Lawyers need legal education. Non-lawyers need legal education. There's an opportunity. We offer a minor now at the main campus for law to kind of enhance whatever career you're going in. Because no matter what, whether you're a business major, an engineering major, or a social worker, across the spectrum of higher education, you're dealing with legal infrastructures and frameworks all the time. And so law schools need to not shy away from that, but really be true leaders in legal education. So in addition to our hybrid JD program, we have professional certificates that we offer to both lawyers and non-lawyers, again, this minor at the main campus. And we're seeing ourselves really approach legal education in a way that is holistic and multidimensional and responds to the needs of people today.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of your time. For those on the webinar, we're going to launch a quick poll. We always love feedback on our program. So if you wouldn't mind, before you jump off, just filling out that quick poll. But you were tremendous, and thank you for all the insight and your time this afternoon. I know you're super busy. So
thank you. It was really fun.
Fantastic. Thanks.